Hello, I'm Speculative Dude. Welcome back to Speculative Dude Reviews. Now, today I'm going to do something just a little bit different, because I've got several movies to catch up on. Instead of doing I might do full reviews on some of these movies later, but I'm going to do a mini review on 3 separate movies right now. First, and these are all movies that I've seen, meant to do reviews on, but just, it took a while to get around to them, unfortunately, due to my schedule. So, the first up being the latest Fast and the Furious movie. I believe this one's called Furious 6, I believe is what they titled this one. I think they're kind of stretching for names on these last one, the last one being Fast 5, this one being Furious 6, and number 4 actually being Fast and Furious. So, not really sure what there's one more part in the series coming out next year. I liked this one better than I have liked part 4 and 5. 4, really, to me, it was funny because up until that point it was the highest grossing in the series, grossing any more than the first 3. 4, to me, though, felt... well, 4 and 5 both felt like it was lacking something, namely in the car department. Now, while they did have great car stunt scenes, it just, the focus in the first 3, there was a lot of racing going on in all 3. Very little actual racing in 4 and 5, and admittedly even in 6. But they were trying to do a shift in the series to a more straight up, more of an action movie, which was okay. It wasn't bad. But 4, to me, despite being at that time the highest grossing in the series, really kind of felt like it was lacking something. 5 did improve, once again, as more of a straight-up action flick. I think some people complained that they were trying to put in too much star power by adding The Rock. Maybe, but I actually liked it. His character, it was good. He's a by-the-book, hard-nosed guy. I think, The Rock is one of those characters where, depending on what role he's in, he can either be really good or kind of, palm to the face, like, oh, brother. I won't bring up which movies those have been, but I'm sure people have seen some. Once again, so I thought actually putting him in this role was pretty good. 6 continues the story again, as expected. You do finally come back to... We know that 4, 5, and 6 all took place supposedly before Tokyo Drift, the 3rd movie, because we've had Han in all 3. At the end, Han does... they do catch up to the part where Han dies in the movie, and it leads you to what will be the last movie coming out next year, supposedly. I won't... No spoilers on that one, but it is very interesting, very good, in my opinion. Or a good lead-up to the final film. This one, as, once again, a straight-up action flick, good, in my opinion, takes what 5 did right and builds on it. So you have the same cast from, essentially the same cast from 5, is in 6. They do bring back Letty. While I like Michelle Rodriguez, I wasn't sure about bringing back her character. They did. It ended up being a little bit better than I thought. But and I will definitely say this much for it: her character has amnesia, and luckily they did not go the convenient route of her at the end somehow getting her memory back. Even at the end of this movie, she still says that she really doesn't remember anything. She says some things feel familiar, but she doesn't actually remember. So I was like, okay, at least they didn't do the Hollywood cliche of at the end of the movie, she suddenly gets her memory back. So I was like, okay, alright, I can give them a little bit of credit for that. It does have, for those of you who've seen it, and those of you who don't, the final big action sequence, as to be expected in any of these movies, is good, but once again, kind of over the top, but hilariously... has the world's longest runway. And I won't elaborate on that any further. Check it out, but you realize they have I don't remember, I believe it's an Antonov I can't remember the actual plane, but basically, essentially, it's the world's largest cargo plane. It's even bigger than the C-5 Galaxy, and they're flying this down this runway, and you realize at the end of the action sequence, they've been flying down this runway for 15 minutes. It's like, wow, that is a really big runway at those speeds. That's about a 30-mile long runway, give or take. You know, so very, very interesting, very unique. But once again, it's what you would expect from a Fast and the Furious movie. If you don't like the Fast and the Furious series, you're not going to like it. If you do, I think you'd enjoy it. Okay, moving on to the next one. Man of Steel. Once again, I actually really enjoyed this one. I know a lot of people, fans of Superman, didn't like it. They said they got his character wrong. A lot of people didn't like the way some characters were portrayed. I have to admit there are some things that I could nitpick about. I wasn't a biggest fan. They tried to make General Zod a semi-sympathetic character by saying, what he was doing for the lost, they lost Krypton and he was trying to do what he was doing, despite being evil, he was trying to do it for a cause. I can understand that if it were someone other than maybe General Zod. General Zod was a conqueror. He wanted to take over and rule. Now, they show that to some extent, but once again, like I said, trying to give him the sympathetic thing of he felt, that, he wanted to, what he was doing was all for the glory of Krypton and trying to bring it back. Once again, with the exception of that, he just came off as, like I said, too much of a trying to play him up as for sympathy, and I didn't like it. I liked him as the straight ahead, I believe I'm more powerful than you, therefore I should rule. Period. I liked that better. But there were many aspects I did like. Some people said they got Superman's character wrong. One thing that a lot of people are forgetting is that this is supposedly the first time Superman has been Superman. This is essentially a reboot. Most people are looking at the Richard Donner films, and don't get me wrong, I do enjoy those. But there was a lot of things in there that were either kind of stretched out or very simplified. They tried to make this one a little bit more complex, and that does work in some ways, in other ways it doesn't. I think they could have done a little bit better with the flashbacks. They kind of placed them very oddly, or at odd times in the movie. But I think it worked on many levels. Wasn't so sure about the whole, how he got his suit. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. He finds basically a crashed Kryptonian ship, another crashed Kryptonian ship on Earth. And there's some skewed timelines in there, because at some point they say that ship's been there for thousands of years, yet Superman, Clark, Kal-El, however you want to say it, his father is essentially the hologram director of this ship. So it's like, okay, do Kryptonians naturally live for thousands of years? I thought they lived longer than normal humans, but I didn't think that their longevity was that big. So it's like, there are some things on there that's just kind of like, okay, I don't know. Overall, though, I thought it was actually pretty good. Lois, for once, was not simply the damsel in distress. Amy Adams did a really good job of making her play the smart character. She actually goes and investigates to try and figure out who the heck is Superman. He saves her at one point during the early thing. Not an over-the-top, and it wasn't as I said, it wasn't a damsel in distress situation. She did just happen to get into a situation, and by coincidence, he was there. So he saved her. But that's really actually the only time he does. Well, I guess he does one more time towards the end of the movie, which, it is Superman, you do expect him to save Lois. But it wasn't in a bad way. I mean, it wasn't done badly. Early on, as I said, he saves her. She decides she wants to figure out who this guy, mysterious man who saved her, is. And he doesn't save her as Superman. He actually just saves her as... In fact, early on, in the beginning of the movie, if you don't know that it's Clark Kent, he doesn't... he isn't given a name early on in the movie because he's kind of moving around doing these, odd jobs and that, trying to kind of keep a low profile. Once again, maybe good, maybe bad. Like I said, she investigates. She does figure out who he is, in here. She actually uses her intelligence. But I kind of wish it had come a little later in the movie. She seems to figure out who he is pretty early on. But that's just a personal nitpick. Overall, there was one thing that really kind of made me scratch my head though. Once he finds the Kryptonian ship, I can understand he accesses the computer, much in the way he activates the crystals in the Richard Donner films to see the hologram of his father, gets his story. I thought that was done really well. But he gets his suit. His suit is kind of a traditional Kryptonian outfit, although don't know why Kryptonians tend to wear capes, but that's neither here nor there. They say that what we know as the symbol of the S is, basically he says in the commercials you see that he says it means hope, but you also find out that it's basically the crest of their family, the family crest, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I thought it was rather interesting that, not like a knight might wear a royal, a crest for their family, or different, if you see a lot of Scottish clans with their kilt, the pattern will be a specific specifying family. So I thought that wasn't necessarily a bad idea. If you look at Zod's, interestingly enough, it is actually a variation I noticed it was actually a variation of the Greek symbol omega. So I thought that was kind of unique. Did they do that on purpose, or was that a subtle little reference? I couldn't tell. That's you can decide that for yourself. But my nitpick. Well, it wasn't so much of a nitpick. My real head scratcher was, through these flashbacks, you see him as a child, learning that he has these powers, trying to control them. There's one point where he's in school and it seems to kind of overwhelm him. He kind of, grows into them, but he doesn't ever fly until he gets the cape and suit off on the Kryptonian ship. It's like, okay, you're telling me he's had all these powers, he knows he has super strength, but he's never tried to make these long leaps or flights before, ever? I don't buy that. And although I do find it amusing that the first time he tries to take off and fly, he crash lands because he can't control it. It's the first time he's ever done it. He's trying to control himself. He crashes. He hits the ground, plows into the side of a hill. Kind of amusing, in my opinion. I was like, okay, yeah, the first time you try and do something, you might fail. Okay. So, overall, I thought it was actually pretty good. I know a lot of people have disagreed, but okay, I'll put that aside. The next one is Pacific Rim. This one, I knew going into this movie I was either going to love it or hate it. And I went with my friend, the engineer, and he really enjoyed it. He had a lot of fun, saying it was one of the most fun movies he'd seen in a long time. Now, fun obviously doesn't necessarily equate to a great movie, but an enjoyable one. This movie, like I said, going into, I knew I would either love it or hate it. It's a giant robot versus giant monsters, and it's Hollywood, so it's like, okay, let's see how they do this. There's, been a lot of references to a lot of the Japanese, whether it's anime or even their live-action monster movies. And I can see why people, compared it. Some of the comparisons don't make any sense at all. A lot of people tried to compare it to Neon Genesis Evangelion. There was nothing even remotely like that here. That comparison is just absurd. If you want to look for something that's more similar, look at Godan. That one actually, there's you actually get not only the reference of two pilots, piloting a mech together, but beasts that seem to kind of come out of nowhere, and periodically, that I think is a much better reference. Some people said Gundam. I don't really get that, other than just the fact that there are giant robots. Yeah, that's not so much. That one's based mostly around war, versus this one really isn't. But as stated before, this, like I said, this one, honestly, this movie did something that only one other movie has done to me, and that was Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr. Halfway through the movie, I didn't know whether I liked it or not. And this is, as I said, this is only the second time that's ever happened. Towards the end, at the end, I realized I really did enjoy it. But at the midpoint, I was questioning myself. It's like, is this, an enjoyable movie or not? And I found out later it, in my opinion, was very much. Partially because it didn't take itself too seriously. There's always these movies, especially in something like that, where there's the danger of them taking it way too, trying to make it more epic than it is. This is a sci-fi movie with a cheesy premise: giant monsters and giant robots. It's difficult, not impossible, but difficult to make that situation seem serious or believable in any means. Now, I'm not saying that this movie made it believable by any means, but it seemed to know what levels it could take its seriousness without dropping into the realm of overly dramatic. And there's points where they seem to really, like I said, be able to make fun of it. The two scientists specifically, they worked well together. They can't stand each other, but in the end they end up working together, and comes off really. They come off as very enjoyable characters. Ron Perlman has a very small part in this movie, and it's very enjoyable, very cheesy, especially the end. I won't spoil what happens at the very end, but it's really good. You get a lot of cliches. The father and son, who work together, where the son is kind of a massive jerk and arrogant. You get the old pilot, or not old pilot, but you get a pilot from the past who comes back. Whether it's for redemption or whatever reasons you want to, he comes back. For one last fight. You get the new pilot who's untested and is thrown in there with the veteran. You get the old commander who's dying, and the doctor's told him, if you ever step foot in one of those things again, you're gonna die. You will die. You get all these cliches and but they're done on a very enjoyable level. Cliches aren't a bad thing if they're done if they're used properly. There's cliches in pretty much any movie you can find. You're going to find some cliche, and this movie is chock full of them. But like I said, they're done very enjoyably. I did enjoy it. So there's a rundown of some of the movies I've seen recently. I will try and get back to doing regular reviews. As I said, at some point I may get to do full reviews on these, but at the moment I just figured I'd do a little recap of what I've been up to those last movies I've seen. And, hopefully we'll get around to seeing some new stuff soon. And I'll put out full episodes soon. Take care of yourself, folks. Speculative Dude, out.